Hello, thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about The Birds by Daphne du Maurier, published in 1952, and I'm comparing it with The Birds, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, released in 1963. And The Birds won a Book First Movie poll I posted on Patreon, and the theme was just movies that are incredibly iconic. And The Birds is a very iconic movie, and that one won the poll, so that is why I'm covering it. And so if you become a Patreon, you can take part in those Book First Movie polls, as well as receive exclusive content, so it would mean so much to me. It helps support the channel, and I will link it down below in the description. But The Birds is definitely, like I said, one of the most iconic Alfred Hitchcock movies, and yet despite its fame, it has never been one of my favorites. Like, I have loved Hitchcock for so long. I specifically remember watching Vertigo and even Rebecca and stuff like that when I was pretty young, I don't know, like 7 or something. And even though the plot of the stories would oftentimes just go over my head, I could still feel that suspense. And ever since I was a kid, I guess I've just loved that suspense, that you get from Hitchcock movies. So yeah, I've loved his movies for a long time, but The Birds I did not remember liking. And so I was curious to rewatch it because it has been a very long time and I wanted to see if my opinion of it had changed. I was also curious to read the short story because it is by Daphne du Maurier, who also wrote Rebecca, which, like I just said, Alfred Hitchcock adapted that as well. And I love that book and movie. I have a Book First movie if you want to check it out. Highly recommend. But The Birds was also the breakout performance of Tippi Hedren, and at the time she was 33, which was considered old for like a new starlet. And so the studio told her to lie about her age and say that she was 5 years younger. So for a long time, she had to lie about her age. And it wasn't until, later in life when she came out being like, that's not really how old I am. I'm 5 years older than that. And normally I would start with like a book and movie review, but I think I'm actually just going to get right into the plot of the book and then into the plot of the movie. So there will be spoilers from here on out. So to start with the book plot, so the book takes place in a England countryside town, and we follow Nat and his family. So he has a wife and 2 children. And Nat is the one who starts to notice the birds acting weird, and early on a bunch of smaller birds come swarming in through the chimney, and then later on he just sees all these seagulls out on the ocean, and he just knows that the birds are acting weird and things are going to get dangerous. And so he boards up their home and is worrying about how to protect his family. And throughout all of this, the wife, especially early on, right? Because Nat is the only one who seems to notice what is happening. But the wife is just always kind of useless and aloof throughout this book. And considering the book is written by a woman, I don't know, I guess I was kind of disappointed that the wife was just kind of useless throughout this whole story. But anyway. So in preparation for the gulls coming in, he rushes to get his daughter from the school bus drop off, and he tells the kids to hurry and rush home and don't stop and play, just go home. And on his way home with his daughter, he sees this neighbor and some other people, and they're saying that they're gathering for a shooting party because they see all these birds, and they're like, hey, we're just going to get together and shoot a bunch of them. Do you want to join us? And Nat realizes that's an incredibly stupid idea, and you're putting your lives at risk. And so he does not join them, of course. But the seagulls come in with the tide, and that's when they attack. And then when the tide goes out, they leave. So when the tide is out, they have a few hours of peace, essentially. But yeah, so when the tide comes in, the birds are attacking and they're hitting the house, but Nat has boarded everything up so they are safe. And then the next morning when the tide is out, and his family go out into town to gather supplies because they don't have enough food and candles and things to last them much longer. So they go into town, and Nat sees some dead bodies inside a home, and so he makes sure his wife and kids don't go in there, but they're able to gather up supplies, and then they go back home, and there had been a radio program that was supposed to turn on at 7 a.m., but 7 a.m. comes and goes, and there's no radio update, because the radio, which is based in the city, they were also noticing these birds and the strange bird attacks and things. And so when the bulletin doesn't come in at 7 a.m., Nat knows the city's done for too and they're being attacked. And he suspects that the bigger birds, the birds of prey, are attacking the city, and the smaller, less dangerous birds are the ones attacking the countryside. The seagulls and the crows are the main ones. But also they hear a plane overhead, and they suspect the plane had been sent in to kill some of the birds. However, the plane ends up crashing, and so it doesn't really do any good. And they often hear the birds hitting the walls and the doors, and they call them suicide birds or something because they hit it so hard that they fall dead. And so when they go out there, there's tons of dead birds everywhere that have killed themselves. And so something Nat will do to help, distract the children from the terror that is happening is when they hear these birds slam into the door, they'll cheer and be like, yay, another one sun killed itself. But the book ends with just them preparing for this to go on like indefinitely, it seems like. And we know from the radio program that this is very widespread. And yeah, so it just ends very open-endedly. And then to move on to the movie, beginning with Melanie and Mitch. So in this movie, we instead follow a woman. Her name is Melanie, and she lives in San Francisco, and she is a socialite. Her father owns this big newspaper. And as of late, we learn how she has been kind of just trying to find her way and to find a purpose in life. Early on in the movie, she drives 2 hours north to the small town of Bodega Bay. And in Bodega Bay is where the bird attacks happen. And it does always seem like the bird attacks happen when she is around. And so it's kind of like with Nat, when he notices things, but no one else does. And so he's trying to tell them about it, and they're just being like, what? You're over-exaggerating. And it's the same thing with Melanie as well. And at one point, partway through the movie, a woman in town accuses Melanie, being like, you're the reason these bird attacks were happening. They didn't start until you showed up here. And so I did think that was interesting. And is there a deeper meaning to this movie? Like the city woman going out into the country, which she isn't used to, and then these bird attacks happen. Like, are they symbolic of something? I don't know, but it's something to think about. But the reason she even went up to Bodega Bay, though, was because Mitch, this guy, came into town in San Francisco. He said he wanted to buy some lovebirds for his sister, and he was just very rude and condescending to Melanie. And so she makes a point to buy these lovebirds for him, and she finds out his address and drives up there to drop off the lovebirds. Which honestly, like, she originally was going to drop it off at his San Francisco apartment, but the guy, a neighbor, tells her like, oh, he's gone till Monday. And it's like, why would you drive 4 hours round trip just to like make a point? You know, like I would just take care of the birds over the weekend and then give them to him on Monday. So it seemed kind of like, wow, like she's willing to do that long drive just to drop off these birds. But yeah, anyway, but she gets to know Mitch better because she like had just met him that day and didn't know him well at all. So she gets to know him throughout this experience, as well as his younger sister, as well as his mother, Lydia. And we see Lydia talking to Mitch, saying how she's not crazy about Mitch hanging out with Melanie, because Melanie is often in the gossip columns because she just kind of has a wild streak, or at least she did. And Lydia specifically mentions, like, I read last summer she jumped in naked into a fountain in Rome. Like, do you really want to be affiliated with someone like that? And later on, when Mitch asks Melanie about this, she tells him, like, I was pushed into that fountain, for one, and two, I was fully clothed, and three, like, the scandal story that was published, that was written by a rival newspaper who just wanted to, like, scandalize my father's name, basically. And this scene was kind of annoying because Mitch was, again, being pretty condescending and not believing her story and wanting to instead believe that she had just jumped in naked. But throughout, the movie, they do open up to each other and become closer, of course, so there is a bit of a romance going on here. And there's also a part in the movie where Lydia is talking to Melanie and she says something about how, like, I don't even know if I like you. However, by the end of the movie, we see them in the car together and Lydia is comforting Melanie and they have this sweet moment together. So we see how clearly Lydia has gotten past her judgments of Melanie and cares about her now and does like her. But I will say I was kind of getting like Norman Bates vibes with Lydia and Mitch, because Lydia is very protective of her son, and we learned through another woman in town who had dated Mitch, she says how Lydia is jealous of the women who date Mitch. And so I thought that was just kind of an interesting relationship there. But I did like all of the character development that goes on here. And like this movie is 2 hours, and the whole first hour really is just focusing on these characters and letting us see into their lives and see the growing bonds that are forming. And so I was surprised by that like there's like no bird attacks in the first half. It really is just the last hour. But there are two scenes in this movie that are like especially famous and iconic. And the first one is when Melanie is waiting outside the school, and I think she's smoking a cigarette, and suddenly on like the monkey bars behind her, there suddenly goes from being like a few crows to she turns around and then it's covered in crows. And so she goes inside the schoolhouse and tells the teacher. And so the teacher has the students quietly walk out, but then once they're outside, she's just like, run! And they're all just running from the birds as the birds are attacking the children and the teachers and stuff. Which, by the way, if you are an Alfred Hitchcock fan, you have to watch High Anxiety. It is a spoof off of just like all these different Hitchcock movies. And their scene making fun of the birds is hilarious because we have Mel Brooks sitting outside at a playground and a bunch of birds, land on the playground equipment. And instead of attacking Mel Brooks, they just start flying over him and pooping on them. So he's like running away from them, trying to stop from being pooped on. And it is hilarious. And then also the scene making fun of Psycho. Yeah, it's a hilarious movie. It has so many scenes that I just like laugh uncontrollably at. So if you're a fan of Hitchcock, then you have to watch High Anxiety. But anyway, another scene I wanted to talk about is near the end where Melanie is at Mitch's house and Mitch and his family are asleep, but Melanie like hears fluttering noises upstairs. So she goes upstairs and she's at the attic door and she like hears the birds behind the door and she opens the door and she sees that they have come in through the roof and then they start attacking her. I will say that this scene in particular I thought was very effective and very well done as these birds are attacking Melanie, and it is a very stressful scene to say the least. And I thought she was going to die for a minute there, but she does not. Mitch does come up and save her and then they bandage her up. I read that when filming that scene, Tippi Hedren turned to Alfred Hitchcock before she opens the door. She's like, why would my character do this? Like, why would she open the door when she hears birds on the other side? And Alfred Hitchcock said, because I said so. And that was his response. But I agree with Tippi Hedren. Like, it makes no sense for her character to do that. Like, it only makes sense in the fact that it's a movie and we want to get this scene. But in like a real life moment, like, why? She wouldn't have opened the door. That would have been so stupid. Nonetheless, it is a very effective scene, like I said. But the movie does have some scenes from the book. For example, that we have the smaller birds like swarming in through the chimney, and they do show only one bird hitting the door and dying. Whereas, like I said, in the book, like a ton of birds were doing that. But it does happen once in the movie. And then, like I said, there's the scene where Nat goes into town and he finds a neighbor dead in his house. And we get that in the movie as well, except it is Lydia who goes to a neighbor's house and she finds him dead. And in the movie, it's a bit more graphic because the man's eyes have been gouged out by the birds. That was something that came up a lot in the book. It never actually happened, but throughout the book, Nat is constantly thinking like, I need to protect my eyes. The birds are going after my eyes. So it was like this fear of them going after the eyes, but it never happens, but it does in the movie. But another favorite scene of mine is after the schoolhouse attack, Melanie goes to a diner, and at this point, the attacks have not become widespread, and so she's telling them, like, this literally just happened. And so we get these people in the diner talking about it and debating about it and arguing about it, and I thought it was really well done, and it kind of reminded me of The Mist, right? Where you have people in a confined area, and something is happening, and you have people who are in denial about it, and you have people just arguing and taking sides and getting aggressive, just that building tension just as the people are discussing it, you know? And so I thought that was a really great scene, and I really loved that moment in particular. But to talk about the movie ending, so Melanie has this bird attack happen and they realize they need to take her to the hospital. And at this time, the birds are kind of like in a lull. And so they're able to get in the car and drive her to San Francisco to get to a hospital. And it just ends as they are leaving the driveway. And then we fade to black and it's over. And that did seem a bit abrupt to me. And I read that originally they were going to include one other shot of them driving to San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge was going to be covered with birds, showing how widespread the attack was. And I wish they would have included that scene. I think that would have been a better ending to the movie rather than us just cutting out as they leave the driveway. Like, it was a bit too abrupt, I think. And so, yeah, I wish they would have had that Golden Gate scene. But to talk about book versus movie, which I liked better, this is a tough one because in some ways I feel like the book was more suspenseful and more effective at making you feel how scary and terrifying this would be to have birds attack. And I just felt that impending doom and that foreboding and that dread even more in the book, I would say. And the movie, it's just one that I've always had a hard time taking seriously. Like, the graphics aren't the best. I mean, they're not terrible either. Like, they were doing the best they could in the times. And for the time, I think it was impressive. But, you know, the schoolhouse scene as they're running away and the kids are being attacked, I just didn't find that scene very effective. And like I said, I also don't think the suspense and terror was built up as well as it could have been. Like in other Hitchcock movies, it's so suspenseful, right? Whereas this, I felt like I just wasn't feeling that suspense as much as I would have liked. But having said all that, there were some great scenes, like I said. So, and I do like the performances as well, too. So I do think it's worth watching. It just isn't my favorite Hitchcock movie. But yeah, I did like the book a lot as well. And I liked how the book, it kind of explains why the birds are attacking. Like, it's something to do, it's kind of a silly reason. It's like something with the weather and the wind and stuff. But they also explain their theory as to why larger birds aren't attacking and why it's seagulls, which seems so random, right? Like cute little seagulls. But his theory is that, you know, the bigger birds are attacking the city because that's like a bigger job to do, I guess, or something. But not that I need an explanation though either. Like in the movie, I'm kind of fine with the bird attack just being so random, right? And we don't know why it's happening. It's just a random attack, it seems. But yeah, anyway, I guess it's kind of a toss-up. Part of me wants to say the movie is the winner because there is just more of a story here and there is more character development. So even though the book I think was better with the suspense and the dread, even so, I think I will say the movie wins. So even though I haven't been saying the best things about the movie, I do think it's an improvement on the book. And there are some great scenes and it is very iconic and we do get great performances and there are some cool, camera angles and things. So I do recommend watching it. And the book, it's a short story. So if you want to read it, it's not like it would take very long anyway. So you may as well, I guess, if you like the movie a lot. But yeah, I will say the movie wins here. So that wraps it up for The Birds. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Let me know if you do like this movie and let me hear your thoughts about why you like it. Also, Tippi Hedren was also in Marnie, which came out like shortly after The Birds. And that's another Hitchcock movie, which is also based on a book. So if you would love to hear my thoughts on Marnie, which stars Tippi Hedren and Sean Connery, comment down below and I will cover Marnie if I know people want me to talk about it. But yeah, thank you for watching this video and, on to the usual spiel I give, asking you to like and subscribe and to comment and to share with your friends and family and to give my podcast a rating and review and follow me on Instagram. And if you want to support the channel monetarily, then you can become a patron, which would mean a lot to me. But yeah, thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye.